The Goodreads Choice Awards are back yet again, and that means it's time for all of us in the bookish community collectively to side-eye the nominees, as we always do. And Goodreads made some questionable choices this year, not only just with the nominees, they do that every year, that's not a surprise, but also by changing up the categories. I'm not going to get into all of that in this video because I feel like it's already going to be long enough, but if you want to see me, along with some other bookish creators, react to the first round of nominees and some of those changes, I'll have a link down below to the live stream on Bookish Bethany's channel, which she was kind enough to invite me to. Feel free to check that out. But in this video, I want to narrow down my focus to a single category, the category that I had already read the most from. And honestly, if you'd asked me before I saw the nominees which category I would have read the most books from, I would not have picked this one. But apparently, I've become a horror girly. No one is more shocked than I am. By the way, if you're new here, my name's Elizabeth. Welcome. I like to read books. I imagine you do too if you are here. And this video is extra special because not only am I going to be reading at least 3 more of the horror nominees in an attempt to have read all of the nominees by the time we get to the next round so that I can vote as a fully informed reader, but I'm not doing it alone. My lovely friend and fellow Canadian booktuber Jananie from The Story Ain't Over are going to be collaborating on this video. We're doing a buddy read for one of these books, and honestly, I'm over the moon. I had the pleasure of meeting Jananie almost a year ago now in January when I visited Toronto, and I feel like we clicked right away. We have so much in common. She's awesome, and if you enjoy my channel, you're gonna love her channel. Her content is so good. So I was really, really excited for us to collaborate on this video and read one of these books together. And to make things even more exciting, the sponsor of today's video, Fable, is allowing us to read in the most collaborative way that I have ever experienced. We're both going to be reading the book we chose in the Fable app so that we can see each other's notes and highlights. We can really communicate back and forth after every single chapter if we want to. And I'm honestly just so excited for this. I think it's going to be so much fun. But before I get too carried away, I can feel myself getting carried away already. I'll talk more about Fable in a bit, but first I want to go through all of the initial nominees this first round, going directly to the horror category. And as you can see, I've already voted. I did vote during that live stream on Bethany's channel. And as you can see, I voted for Monstrilio by Gerardo Samano Cordova. This was an advanced listener copy, an audiobook that I got from NetGalley. And I feel like it's pretty obvious because I voted for it, but I really liked it. I thought Monstrilio was amazing. It was one of the weirdest books I've ever read, which for me is a great thing. I love weird lit. It's very strange. It is horrifying. It does have those sort of gory, monstrous, violent, at times sort of body horror-esque horror elements that were more poignant and sad than they were scary just because of the context of the story. But it's really a story mostly focused on a family and loss within that family and their complicated relationships with each other, and also learning to accept your loved ones for who they are, if you can. There's lots of LGBTQIA+ characters in this. It's really beautifully written. I felt all the feels when I was reading it. I thought it was fantastic. So for me, it was obviously a 5-star read. And of the 4 I've read, it's by far the one that stayed with me the most, that I loved the absolute most. So it definitely had to get my vote in this first round. I am curious to know if any of the books I read in this video will be even better than Monstrilio. I don't know how. I feel like that would be so hard because Monstrilio is amazing, but maybe. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at it. If I could read something even better, that would be fantastic. It would have to be a really, really good book. And, you know, I'm not opposed to reading really, really good books. I actually prefer it. So anyways, here are all the nominees for the opening round in the horror category. So out of these 20 books, I've read 4 of them. And of the remaining 16, I'm interested in 10 of them. So I'm going to be choosing my TBR for this video from these 10 in the hopes that they will be the one to go on to the next round, because the other 6 aren't really as intriguing to me. So let's go through all the 20 nominees briefly, hopefully, because y'all know I like to talk. Vampires del Norte by Isabel Cañas. This is one that I'm interested in. It was actually already on my TBR. I have not read from this author before, but some of her other books are also on my TBR. I've heard a lot about them. So this is one that was already kind of on my radar. I'm definitely interested in it. Then we have Natural Beauty by Ling Ling Huang. This is another one that was already on my TBR before I saw this list. I was actually hoping to get it from my library for my last reading vlog, my horror vlog vlog that I did for Halloween. If you missed that, I'll have the link in the description box. You can watch that after this video, but I didn't get it in time for my library. And when I was talking to Jananie about which of the nominees we were most interested in, both of us had highlighted Natural Beauty as one that was right at the top of our lists. So Natural Beauty is going to be our buddy read for this video, which I'm pumped for because I'm really looking forward to this book in general, and I think it'll be really cool to read it with Jananie and get to experience all her thoughts as well as my own as we go through. So very excited for that one. Then we have Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. This is one of the ones that I'm not as intrigued to read, only because I have read from Mariana Enriquez before. I read her short story collection, didn't really enjoy the experience of reading it. So as much as I'm not against the idea of reading from her in the future, I just feel like there are other options I'm more interested in. So as of right now, this one's not one that I'm super excited to get into. Next, we have Her Little Flowers by Shannon Morgan. This is one I hadn't heard of before I saw the list, and I read the synopsis, and honestly, it just doesn't pull me in. There's nothing about the title or the description or the cover that makes me interested in this book. Moving on to The September House by Carissa Orlando. As soon as I read the description, I immediately added it to my want to read list. This one is another haunted house, but it has a very different vibe to it. It's like this woman moves into her dream house and it becomes a haunted nightmare, but then she's like, I'm not leaving. This is my house. You will not make me run away. And I kind of love that. I feel like that's a vibe. So I'm interested. Sounds good. Then we have Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. This one also was intriguing to me. I liked the cover. This is a sort of cultish or religious extremism horror. I wouldn't say that that's the subgenre of horror that I read the most or am most drawn to, but I do find it interesting when done well. And the description of this one, especially combining it with a farm, which I feel like has a lot of, maybe it's just because I'm vegan, but farms are ripe for horror. So I'm interested in this one. Next, we have Sisters of the Lost Nation by Nick Medina. I'm always up for reading Indigenous horror. I feel like Indigenous authors have a very unique perspective on what constitutes horror. This one is one that is definitely at the top of my list. I'm very, very interested in reading it. Next, we have Holly by Stephen King, and this one is not on my TBR, and I didn't add it when I saw it was on the list. If y'all saw my horror reading vlog from the other week, then you know that I read my first ever Stephen King. I read one of his short stories, and not to give it away, but it didn't go well. I didn't have a good time, and I am 100% going to give Stephen King another try. I'm not ready to just write him off forever, but I think I have to start with one of his well-known, famous, much beloved works, or even pick up a couple of his books and read them all at once and just really immerse myself, because I've been burned once. I don't want to be burned again. Then we have Dead 11 by Jimmy Giuliano. This is one that I hadn't heard of before seeing this list, but I immediately added it to my TBR after reading the description. This is a creepy island where everyone has a weird obsession with the year 1994, and everyone lives like it's 1994. As someone born in 1992, I feel like this is going to be very nostalgic. The description is very strange, and I love weird horror. I'm into it. Give me those retro vibes. Then we have The Reformatory by Tena Narive Du, but this one also sounds really interesting. This is another one that I hadn't heard of, but immediately added to my TBR. This is horror based on the Jim Crow South and a creepy, haunted all-boys school. It sounds terrifying, and I'm very intrigued. Then we have Becoming the Boogeyman by Richard Chismar. This is the second book in a series, and I'm not a fan of having to read two books for the price of one, so that immediately discounted this for me. But I also don't know if I'm really a boogeyman horror kind of person. I've never felt the need to read any book about a boogeyman, and I don't plan on starting now. Next, we have How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I'm not super interested in this one. I've read a couple Grady Hendrix books. I guess I've read two now, and neither one of them were my thing. I just don't really like his writing. So I'm not interested in reading more of his work. I told myself after the last time I read Grady Hendrix that I was just not going to do that to myself again. So I'm trying to stick to my guns here. Next, there is Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. And this is the second book in a series that I actually have read the first book in, which was My Heart is a Chainsaw. I liked My Heart is a Chainsaw. I gave it 3 stars, I think. It didn't blow me away, but I did like it. I thought it was interesting. I've also read another one of Stephen Graham Jones' books, and it also was around a 3-star read for me. There were some things that didn't didn't quite click, but I still found it terrifying and also really easy to read, really immersive and fast-paced and engaging. So I'm definitely not against reading the second book in this series. I might not read it for this video only because I imagine it'll be harder to talk about in a reading vlog, because not only will I not want to spoil this book, but I won't want to spoil the first book for people who haven't read it yet. Also, this one is like 500 pages long, and 500 pages is a lot for a horror book. Then we have A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I've read from T. Kingfisher before, and again, they're an author that for me so far has sat in around the 3-star range. And this one sounds fun. It's a Southern Gothic haunting story. I feel like it seems like it would have a little bit more of a cozy horror vibe. If cozy horror is a thing, I feel like it's a thing. That one is definitely added to the list. Next we have Mr. Magic by Kirsten White. And this one I had not heard of before. And honestly, it doesn't really do anything for me reading the description. It's former child stars. I've been burned before by books of all genres that focus on famous people. I feel like it doesn't really work for me. I'm not sure if I'm interested in a bunch of child stars in a horrifying situation. I don't know. It just doesn't, nothing about it is intriguing me. Next we have My Darling Girl by Jennifer McMahon. And this is another one that just didn't really draw me in. I don't feel any urge to read this. Then we have Silver Nitrate by Sylvia Moreno-Garcia. This is one that I have read before. I read it a couple months ago, and it didn't really do anything for me. I feel like Sylvia Moreno-Garcia is a very hit or miss author for me. And so far, her horror is miss. The first book I read by Sylvia Moreno-Garcia was Mexican Gothic, and then I've now read Silver Nitrate. Both of them had interesting concepts, and I felt like I should like them more than I did. But in both cases, the execution just didn't quite work for me. I felt like in both of those books, there were choices made that kind of undermined the horror, I guess. I didn't click with really any of the characters in either of those books, whereas The Beautiful Ones had a really interesting atmosphere to it. I really liked the story beats and the choices that she made, and I really connected with the characters. Even the unlikable ones were interesting. I'm starting to think that maybe Sylvia Moreno-Garcia just isn't a horror author for me, but that some of her other work will be up my alley. But yeah, Silver Nitrate, I didn't find it scary. I wasn't invested. I didn't like the characters. It wasn't my thing. So yeah. Then we have Lone Women by Victor Laval. This is one that I actually just finished the other day, like 2 days ago, and it was okay for me. It was very middle of the road. I gave it 3 stars. In a similar vein to Sylvia Moreno-Garcia's horror books, I just feel like this one had a really good concept, a lot of potential, but the execution just didn't quite serve the story. In this one in particular, the setting had so much potential. She is a lone Black woman in a desolate landscape with a secret. I felt like the environment, the plains themselves could have been such a prominent character in this book. It could have added so much more terror. Just the idea of her being a woman alone, never knowing if the next person riding over the horizon toward her little cabin would be friend or foe, and adding in the extra layer of not only being a woman at the turn of the century alone, but also a Black woman. I just feel like we didn't get that at all, because even though she was supposed to be in the middle of nowhere, supposed to be miles and miles from any other living soul, she was constantly with other people. There were people visiting her 24/7, people riding up every single day. Like, did they not have work to do? Do they not all have farms that they're, working the land? I feel like they have way more free time than makes sense for their situation. It also could have had the extra factor of survival. Can she actually make it through her first winter? And she's starting late. So there should have been some level of panic and anxiety and stress about making it through that first winter and surviving on her own for the first time. And there was just none of that. Like, she just magically was fine, I guess. And then the other thing the author did that was kind of baffling to me is that the biggest mystery of this book was what's in the trunk? What is her family's secret? What have they done everything to hide? And what happened to her parents? And are they connected? And those questions were answered way too early. And I feel like as soon as we knew the answer of what was in the trunk, what happened to her parents, a lot of the tension and mystery was just completely sucked out of the story. I really think that it would have been served by dragging out that secret a little bit longer and building the tension and building the fear of the trunk, allowing the reader's imagination to go wild, coming up with lots of different solutions of what it could be, and then finally revealing it. And it also felt like it sort of contradicted some of the thematic content. There were too many characters, too many different threads of storylines thrown in, and I didn't love any of the characters except for Sam. I don't know. I'm sitting around a 3-star, but I have very complicated feelings about it. Wasn't exactly what I've been hoping for, you know? Then we have the final book on this initial nominations list, which is Rouge by Mona Awad. And I literally just read this book in my horror vlog. If you missed that video, check that one out for a full reading vlog and review of Rouge, because I already talked longer about these nominees than I planned to. All I will say is that I really liked Rouge. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was great, and it was the other contender for me out of the 4 I've read for getting my vote for this category, but Monstrilio just beat it out a little bit. But Rouge is also a fantastic book, so I really hope it makes it to the next round, even though I didn't vote for it. That's the horror category. With that, I'm going to go off and start reading Natural Beauty. I'm really excited, and I'll be back soon to share my initial thoughts. Today's video is sponsored by Fable. Fable is a community-powered app for finding, reading, and discussing books with other people. I'm really excited to try out Fable's buddy reading functionality and their e-reader in this video. Right now, the ability to buy ebooks through Fable is only available in the US, but fingers crossed they will be expanding soon. But even if you're not buying your books through Fable and reading them in the app, you can still use so many community features to connect with other readers, to make wish lists and TBRs, discover new books to read, and so much more. On Fable, you can start a private club for you and your friends to stay connected, chat about books, give each other recommendations, keep track of your reading goals, and so much more. I'm actually going to try to convince my best friend to download Fable so we can start our own group, because we've been getting into buddy reading together and have been really bad about actually talking about the book. When we FaceTime, we get distracted and just talk about our lives instead. So I feel like making a group on Fable would keep us more accountable to actually read the books that we're buddy reading, and also to actually talk about them with each other. You pick a book to read and set milestones for the club, and then Fable app automatically creates chapter discussion rooms so you can chat about each chapter with no spoilers. Everyone can follow the suggested milestones, or you can read at your own pace. Come back once you're done reading to leave your reflections and review, as well as read each other's, of course, before choosing your next book and moving on. If you're a reader in the US, you can level up the entire experience by using Fable's e-reader. together. If you and your friends choose to buy the ebook through Fable, you don't have to. You can see each other's highlights, comments, and emoji reactions as you read together. The discussion within the book also shows up in the chapter discussion rooms, but it's such a cool added layer to the experience to actually see your friends' comments, highlights, emoji reactions as you read the book. It's like reading each other's annotated versions of the book simultaneously, which is honestly my dream come true. But you don't have to share all of your annotations. If there are things you want to keep to yourself, that is an option as well, with private tabs for annotations and private notes. Fable sells some books in the app itself and others on their website, so feel free to check out their bookstore for your book club's next read. Fable has so many other really awesome tools that you should definitely check out. I love their list building tools. I've only just gotten started building my own lists, but y'all know I'm going to get carried away, because when do I not get carried away when it comes to books? They also have an amazing For You feed, which is just an endless stream of content from fellow book lovers. Download the free Fable app using the link in the description. Then in the clubs tab, tap that little blue plus icon to make your own buddy read. Then all you have to do is invite a few friends to join your buddy read. For each friend that joins, you get a $5 Fable credit to put toward your club's ebook on Fable. Inviting friends is a super easy way to get your read for free. Thank you again to Fable for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to click the link in my description to download the app for free. It's no risk, and the app is super cool. There are so many features to check out, so many ways to connect to your friends and find fellow book lovers in the community. I highly recommend. Okay, I've done a lot of reading since I was here last, so I have a lot to update you on. I am more than halfway through Natural Beauty. I've DNF'd a book. I am finished 2 other books and more than halfway through a 5th. Starting with Natural Beauty, like I said, I am more than halfway through this book at this point, and it's really interesting. It's very weird. It reminds me a lot of Rouge in a lot of ways. Jananie has actually also read Rouge, although she didn't enjoy it as much as I did. But we just keep commenting back and forth on little aspects of the story here and there that are very Rouge coded. So if you are a fan of Rouge, you might like Natural Beauty because there's a lot of similarities going on. Even more so than just enjoying the story so far, because it's very strange and gruesome at times and sort of absurdist and also heartbreaking and exploring real issues. I'm also having so much more fun because I'm reading it with Jananie through Fable. It's honestly so fun to be reading through a chapter and see a section already highlighted, tap on it and see that the person you're buddy reading with has left a comment. So many times I was reading a passage and I had a thought and then I saw that Jananie left a comment and I tapped on it and she said word for word, verbatim, what my thought was. It's very fun to have that back and forth, and sometimes she notices things that I didn't notice or I noticed things that she didn't. Making lots of progress. I'm really excited to get to the end. We've already had a couple reveals that were pretty major, so I'm excited to see how everything else comes together. I really hope that Ling Ling Huang can stick the landing, because so far this has been a book that's very much up my alley. Lots of similar thematic content to Rouge, unrealistic beauty standards, Eurocentric beauty standards, everyone molding themselves into variations on the same person instead of enjoying our diverse beauty, complicated parental relationships. So a lot of those themes overlap, but there's also some other things in this one that I'm finding really interesting, like the main character's experience being first-generation American, her parents' immigration experience and how that impacted her. Also her life as essentially a child prodigy, a pianist with immense skill who spent all of her young life studying and playing every single day, all day, for hours and hours and hours. Her relationship to music, to classical music specifically, to piano, is really beautiful to read about as someone who has played piano for almost my whole life. I started piano lessons when I was pretty young, and I obviously was not a child prodigy. Did not reach the level of our protagonist, but I've always adored playing piano. When you get into the flow, when your muscle memory takes over, when you're just living in the music, it's such a unique experience. I'm starting to get emotional, but a lot of passages in this book actually have made me feel emotional. Just her longing for that ease and belonging that she gets at the piano, and her deep love of the music and how it connects her to her parents, who are both pianists. It's really, really beautiful. I'm really enjoying it. I'm excited to see what happens. I feel like there are so many ways that the story could go, and there have been quite a few moments already that were quite shocking. So I'm excited to see how it all pans out. Okay, so moving on to the next book that I started, which is also the one that I DNF'd, which is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I thought for sure this one would be a quick, easy to read, sort of cozy horror, and maybe it gets there, but I found myself so irritated from basically as soon as it started. The main character is hard to get on board with. She's not only not like other girls, but also kind of not like other humans. She very much has a forced quirkiness to her that I find grating. Just overall, so far, nothing is really capturing me. I'm finding the writing style kind of frustrating. The main character is just rambling on all the time about completely unrelated things, and it feels like because the author's really trying to make her quirky and like different and fun, she'll go on for way too long about something that it could have just been a sentence, but it's a whole paragraph because she has to be super quirky about it and keep restating things in different ways and really go down the rabbit hole of a metaphor. So it's just not really doing it for me. And I was going to try to just keep pushing through and see if it got better, because I felt like I hadn't given it enough of a chance to really say one way or the other. But then I got to a moment where the main character wakes up in the room that she used to sleep in her grandmother's house, and her mom had repainted it to be the same color it was when she was a kid. And she has that moment that a lot of us have had where we wake up and for a moment we can't remember if it's the past or the present. You know, am I a 10-year-old waking up in this room, or am I the adult version of me? But, you know, most of us pretty much immediately, as soon as the fog clears from our sleep-addled minds, we realize that we are in fact the present-day version of ourselves. But this main character went on for ages about how she really couldn't tell if she was 10 or an adult, and really hoped she wasn't 10 because then she would have to rewrite her thesis, without acknowledging the fact that knowing that she had written a thesis and how much work it took and not wanting to relive that experience makes it very clear that you have written the thesis and are therefore an adult. But no, that's not what clues are in, that it's present day. What clues are in is that she looks down and notices that her boobs are bigger than her head and comments to herself that she didn't have those when she was 10. So clearly she's an adult, which I feel like there are so many other ways that could have gone, even if she really needed it to be this long bit instead of something more realistic. But the fact that it was noticing how huge her breasts were, that was a bit strange for me. And after I read that moment, I was like, I just need a break. This book is grinding my gears. I might try again, but I don't know. It's not doing it for me. And usually I really do try to get further along in a book before I DNF it. I'm not very far into it at all, but I'm not having a good time. Okay, so I'm just moving on for now. If you have read A House with Good Bones and you have thoughts about it, good, bad, somewhere in the middle, complicated, whatever they are, let me know in the comments, because right now I'm not feeling it. So after I DNF'd The House with Good Bones, I decided to pick up The September House, and I got the audiobook. I have complicated feelings about this book. There are some things I really loved about it and some things that I did not enjoy. One of the things that hit me from the very beginning is how nonchalant our MC is about her haunted house situation. We know right from the beginning that she and her husband moved into a haunted house, and we also know that she has just decided this is her new normal. She doesn't want to leave her dream home. She's just going to adapt to whatever situation, even if that's blood running down the walls and little ghost children appearing and some of them biting her viciously, a ghost maid who wants to make all her meals and make her tea, but also looks like the victim of a murder because she was. And at first I just found it really funny how chill she was about everything and just non-reactive. Just like, oh yeah, those are just the ghost children. It's fine. Oh yeah, I just have to bring the bones of the dead mother of this ghost child inside so that he'll chill out for a couple days and stop gnawing on our limbs. It just has a lot of dark humor and silliness almost to it. It's like almost campy. But then it started to get a little irritating. Our MC is middle-aged and she and her husband have bought this house, live in it alone. They have one daughter who is an adult and living out on her own. And we don't get too much of her interactions with her husband at the beginning, so we don't really know what their relationship is like. But we get a lot of her relationship with her daughter. And I found it pretty off-putting how the main character talked about her daughter, how she described her daughter's personality, her daughter's moods in a very sort of judgmental and dismissive way that, I don't know, it just rubbed me the wrong way. I didn't enjoy how she was talking about her daughter. I felt really bad for her daughter for the way that her mom was describing her and thinking about her, just in the worst way possible at all times, basically. And we didn't know a lot about her relationship to her husband, but I did find it a little bit off-putting how dismissive she was of her husband, who was clearly not coping as well as she was with their haunted house and was afraid and wanted to leave, and she just refused to and was not sympathetic to his totally fair fear. It just doesn't sound super peaceful as a forever home situation, you know? But slowly over time, we start to understand her dynamic with her husband, why she feels the way she does about the house, what has led her to be so accommodating and flexible and able to roll with the punches in their very unconventional home. And I started to have more sympathy for the main character. I started to understand her more. I still didn't love her as a character, and I still didn't love a lot of the choices she made, both in the past and more in the present day. So she was kind of a hard MC to get on board with for me, but I did find the story itself really easy to read, really engaging. I thought the primary theme of the story, which I can't really talk about in a non-spoiler sense because I think it gives away too much, but the main theme of the story I thought was well done, and I liked how it all came together, and we finally understood why she was the way she was and why she was so steadfast in staying in this house and why she was able to live with this horror all around her. And I thought it was a really well done metaphor. So I will talk about that in a spoiler section for anyone who either has already read the book or doesn't mind being spoiled, or maybe you know you're not going to read it, because I do think that was the most well done aspect of the story. I also thought it was pretty scary. Not at the start. It really slowly ramped up. And like I said, the beginning was a bit more dark humor and campiness, but as we got toward the end, especially the final climax, it was pretty horrifying. There was a lot going on. There was quite a bit of extreme body horror that I didn't expect and gore, but it also just got pretty terrifying in the last quarter, I would say. So hats off to the author for that as well. I thought it was quite scary at the end, and very tense, very fast paced. I definitely wouldn't have been able to put it down in that last section, but it definitely is a slow ramp up. That atmosphere and the creepiness and the scariness isn't there from the beginning. It really slowly builds as the story progresses. I think that's all I can say without spoilers. So I will say I gave The September House 3 stars. I think there were some great things about it, some things I didn't love as much about it. It was a solid horror. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. There were just some things for me that didn't quite click, but I liked it. So 3 stars from me for September House. And now I'm going to do a short spoiler section so I can talk about that main through line, that theme. So spoilers now. Check out the chapters in the description box if you want to jump to the end of the spoiler section. I'll also have this frame around me for the whole spoiler section, so you can just scrub through until it disappears if you want to do it that way. So getting into the spoilers for this, that main through line, that theme that I thought was well done is that the haunted house and her experience there is essentially a metaphor for the experience of being in an abusive relationship and choosing to double down, to recommit, to stay loyal, to do everything you can as the victim of an abuser to appease them and make things better and to fix it rather than leave. And our main character has been in an abusive marriage. Her husband abused her verbally, emotionally, physically from relatively early on in their relationship. And not only do we see in flashbacks how their abusive relationship ramped up over time, but we also see how that relationship informed how she reacted to the house. Because for her, the love of her life is also her abuser, and she loves him and she wants to stay with him. And she feels like she's happy with him despite the abuse. And she doesn't want to leave because she is loyal to him and she feels like they belong together. And she has built all of these rules for herself to follow to keep him as happy as possible. And when she is faced with a house that, you know, is their dream house and she loves everything about it and she wants this to be her home, and it's slowly revealed that this house was not what it seems, and it's actually horrifying, and it's actually trying to harm them in a variety of ways, she just falls back on her coping mechanisms that she's already developed and doubles down. She is loyal to this home. She's not leaving. She's not giving up. She is going to follow all the rules she needs to follow to keep the ghosts happy, to keep the house happy, to survive, and everything is fine. And it's pretty heartbreaking to realize why she is so able to deal with this horror, and just the idea that she has been living in fear and in pain for so long that living in this terrifying haunted house feels like just more of something she's dealt with and something else she can overcome and something else she can endure for love. And there's quite a few moments where we get little peeks into her psyche and why she feels this way. Quotes like, "After all, if we didn't love something, flaws included, what sort of love would that be?" And she really deeply feels you don't give up on those you love. You don't give up on things you love. You stick it out. You adjust. You're flexible. You mold yourself to the situation. You make yourself into what you need to be to appease the abuser or the haunted house so that you can keep surviving and you can hold on to that thing that you love. And it's heartbreaking to read about. I think it was really well done. I say that as someone who has not been in an abusive relationship. So please correct me if I'm wrong in the comments if you read this and felt otherwise. But for me, it did feel like a really interesting way to explore the psyche of someone who has been on the receiving end, who has been the victim of domestic abuse for such a long time that they just can't see any other way to live. Looking at it from the outside, you want her to find a healthier coping mechanism for herself and not put herself through that level of terror constantly to appease an abuser or a haunted house. You know, it's really sad to read, but it also makes sense. And I found the ending really, not only really scary, but very satisfying. I liked the way the ending came together. I liked that we got an indication that the ending is probably happy and that she can stay in this house that she loves and ideally have a healthier time in the house because her husband is gone and because the ghosts have been able to find peace on a certain level, and ideally that's what makes her happy, is staying, and hopefully the beginnings of a healthier relationship with her daughter. So while it's definitely not my favorite horror novel from this category, I think it has a lot to give. I think a lot of people would like it. It's not only scary and exciting and engaging, but it also has a message, and I think it does a good job of exploring that. So once I finished The September House, I wanted to pick up another audiobook so I could have both an audiobook and an ebook going at once. And I decided to go with Dead 11, and this one did not work as well for me. I was really excited for this one. I loved the idea of a weird island where everyone is just stuck in 1993. The 90s feel very nostalgic for me. There were a lot of aspects of this that felt like home, like my childhood, you know, Pogs. So many good memories with Pogs. But it just didn't really do it for me. I didn't love the writing style, starting right from the first chapter, which is an author's note, not the actual author, but the character in the story that's writing this to the reader within this fictional world. I felt like it gave too much away and tipped the author's hand for what was to come in a way that drained a lot of the tension from especially the climax of the story for me. I thought it was a weird choice. I think an author's note is fine if you want to sort of set the scene and maybe set some expectations, but I just felt like it gave way too much away. It's like when a blurb basically gives away a twist. That's what it felt like. So I was already feeling kind of annoyed and wishing that I just skipped it because I felt like I knew too much. But then as the story progresses, I found the structure where we're jumping back and forth between Willow's experience before she gets to the island and then her time on the island. And then we also get her brother's experience when he goes looking for her on the island. There was just a lot of back and forth. I found her brother really annoying. I did not enjoy his chapters. I didn't enjoy him as a character. I just always wanted to get back to Willow. But I also found Willow kind of strange. She was meant to be, I think, in at least her mid to late 30s, having been a teacher for a really long time. But the way she was written, she felt maybe 23. She felt super young, super naive, and just almost like a teenager in a lot of her mannerisms and thought patterns. And I just found it kind of strange. Her characterization felt very at odds with who the character is supposed to be. I also, just a personal pet peeve, I'm not a sports fan, and there was a lot of extra stuff about basketball in this story, which I don't care. I don't care about basketball. I don't want to read about it. Anytime a book has an excessive amount of sports in it, I just start to zone out because it's just not interesting to me. It was also very repetitive because of the structure. We basically have Willow coming to the island as an outsider, slowly realizing things are off, slowly discovering what the mystery is, and then trying to do something about it. But we also get Harper doing exactly the same thing. He's coming to the island, noticing something's off, slowly figuring out the mystery, and then trying to do something about it. So every time we had a discovery or a reveal, it would happen multiple times, sometimes not even just twice for Willow and Harper, but we'd also get reveals for when other characters in the story first figured out whatever this mystery is. And it just started to get really tedious at some point because we know what's happening. We've been shown it from so many different angles, but we just kept repeating the same things. Kind of like how this island is stuck in its own Groundhog Day of repeating the same day in 1993 over and over and over again. That's kind of what it felt like reading the book, which was not super enjoyable. I also found the central metaphor, which seemed to be that the island represented grief and sort of being stuck in the past through your grief, not being able to let go and move on and just just continuing to live in the moment that you lost a loved one because it feels like the least painful way to go on without them. That metaphor didn't really work for me with the way the reveals played out and the way the ending came together. It felt disjointed from the primary theme, unless the theme was something else, but I'm not really sure what else it could be. It felt very clear that it was about grief and being stuck in that moment and not being able to break out, and it just didn't really work with the way it all played out. I think a different ending would have been more appropriate for the story, been more interesting, and also driven home the message in a clearer way. So just all around, this book didn't really do it for me. I didn't have a great time reading it, with the only exception being the 90s nostalgia. I did enjoy that, but I didn't even really find it scary. The only thing that legitimately scared me ended up having zero relevance to the main plot, which was a big letdown for me because I thought for sure it was going to tie in, and it was the scariest thing for me. So I thought that was going to have some big part to play in the climax, and it just didn't. It ended up being completely irrelevant. And there were a lot of weird plot holes and sort of conveniences that happened that didn't make any sense logically to me. So yeah, this one was a miss for me, unfortunately. I didn't despise everything about it, but I didn't have a great time. So for me, Dead 11 is a 2-star read. I wouldn't necessarily recommend unless you're a big basketball fan and you love the 90s and you like stories that are very circuitous and repetitive. I'm going to do a super short spoiler section yet again for anyone who has already read this and wants to hear more spoilery thoughts, or for anyone who knows for sure they're not going to read it. Basically, it turns out that this island, not actually frozen in time, but they're actively working to keep it seeming like it's 1993 because there's a great evil that lives on the island that every so often takes a bunch of people, kills them, eventually, will take every living thing on the island and then move on to another. It's happened with other islands. And they had this tragedy where this great evil took 11 children, and it was very traumatic. And the pastor on the island, Ruth, does some digging and thinks that she's figured out that the way to save everyone is to trick the evil into thinking that it's still that same day forever. If they keep repeating doing the same things, if they keep dressing like it's the same year, if they just keep repeating these rituals, the evil will be tricked into thinking that no time has passed and it won't come for anyone else. Just basically repeat the same day over and over and over again, trying to save themselves and also the whole world, because they think if the great evil kills all of them, it'll move on to the mainland and just continue to devour all of humanity, basically. So they feel like they're soldiers protecting the world from this great evil by doing this. And that was kind of a weird reason for it for me. It didn't really resonate, I guess. But like I said, I didn't think it really worked for the larger metaphor of being trapped in your grief, because if this great evil is a manifestation of grief and, they're reliving their lives, reliving the same day over and over again to appease the grief, basically. And then the ending is that they just keep doing it forever because that's the only way to keep the grief at bay. It doesn't really make sense, because really the message should be that while it feels like it's less painful to keep living in that moment and to pretend that nothing has changed and not to move on, it actually is more painful to not move on and to not let go and to force yourself to relive that moment over and over and over again. And letting go is what sets you free and allows you to move on and allows you to heal. Time and distance and changing and evolving do help with feeling a little bit more distant from your grief and it becoming more manageable. But that's not how this played out. And I guess maybe the message is supposed to be that they're doing the wrong thing and that they're not actually saving themselves or anyone else by continuing to live in their grief. But the way that the monster plays out, the fact that it is in fact real and it will in fact kill them all if they don't keep doing this, just feels like it's working against the message. So I found that weird. I also was really disappointed that the scariest part of this book, which was her nightmare of the creepy man who told her to go run to her mother, that she had this vision of him coming into her house when she was a kid, and he was all like creepy and spidery and lanky and scary, that he actually had zero relevance to the plot and was just a dream and had nothing to do with his evil. It's not like it was a manifestation of the evil and he was drawing her to him or something because he could sense that she would have this great grief in the future. It was just a dream. And that was really disappointing because that scary monster from her dream was the scariest thing in this book by far. So I think the biggest thing for me was both Willow acting like a teenager and making really stupid decisions over and over and over again, and then Harper learning everything that happened, learning that they essentially murdered his sister. He just leaves the island and is like, cool, yeah, I won't tell anyone. No one needs to know what you're doing there. It's fine. And he also like completely believes them. As soon as someone tells him the mystery, he's like, yeah, that's legit. I totally believe in these ghosts of your loved ones coming back and trying to lure you away and this great evil that's going to murder everyone. That sounds totally realistic. And Willow starts to believe it, and we understand why she would, because she's grieving. She misses her son so much, and she sees her son and she feels like this is her chance to be with her son again. So we understand she's in this like really dark, difficult place. She's in the depths of her grief, and this is something to hold on to. So we see why she would believe. But why does Harper believe? We don't know anything about him that would make us think that he would. We don't know if he's religious, whether he believes in anything supernatural at all. We get zero insight. He just immediately takes what this random man on this creepy island where his sister went missing at his word and believing everything he tells him for some reason, and decides not to use all the information he's learned to blow it all up and expose this island, even though that's what his sister was trying to do before she died, because he just doesn't care anymore. I don't know. Okay, the last thing that I want to mention as a spoiler is that it's revealed at one point that the people on the island have like people everywhere. They have connections. They're like the mafia, and the mainland is full of people that they control who are seeking out perfect candidates that they can bring to the island because their population is dwindling and they need more people to keep, tricking the evil. They need more soldiers. So they have all these connections of people off the island who are like trying to find people who they think could fit in on the island. And that's how Willow ended up actually going to the island, is somebody had sort of targeted her as a mark, but they also didn't do anything to try to actually indoctrinate her or bring her into the fold. They just set her up for failure in every possible way and were very alienating and strange with her. Their approach made no sense, but also the fact that they apparently have all this power and have all these people on the mainland who they control, and they are watching everyone everywhere no matter what, and they can scrub any information off the internet, even though they don't even really have internet on the island. It makes no sense because it's not like there's some wealthy corporation with lots of connections. It's not like they are part of some international organization. It's a tiny village's worth of people on a little island, and the pastor is basically the great mastermind. It's just very strange. I didn't understand where all of this was coming from and how any of this made any sense, especially if they're struggling to keep people on the island. Why would they send people who know the reality of the island off the island to try to find more people? Like, just keep the people you already had on the island if it's so important to have them, and then continue to encourage people to reproduce, I guess. Like, I don't know, adopt more people. Like, I'm sure there are babies who need adoption, not that they deserve to grow up on the island, but like, I don't know. I feel like there are other solutions than creepily following people and infiltrating their lives and then trying to lure them to the island only to then not actually indoctrinate them into anything and let them stumble into dangerous situations and then die in a completely unhelpful way. So anyways, that was Dead 11. A huge disappointment. I'm really sad. I thought I was going to love it. I thought it was going to have all the vibes. I was going to love the nostalgic 90s-ness of it and have a great time with the mystery. Definitely not a contender for me for best in the horror category. Monstrilio is still sitting pretty at the top of that pile for me, with Rouge close behind. So I did start reading Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison, and I'm enjoying it so far. It's not exactly what I expected, not in a bad way necessarily. It was made clear that this main character grew up in a sort of extreme religious sect, potentially a cult situation, and that she had left, and then circumstances have led her to visit home again. So I was expecting a cult story and for the creepiness to have to do with a cult, but I definitely didn't see the type of cult it was coming, and I didn't see the reveal that we had about her family coming. I am really curious to see how this plays out. I didn't actually realize how far in I was. I thought I was just getting close to 50%, but I'm at 64%. So I am actually getting closer to the end. And honestly, not very much has happened. I guess this book is pretty short, so that's part of it. But it does feel a bit odd to be this far through and for so little to have actually occurred. But maybe I'm on the cusp of everything blowing up and getting darker and scarier and more intense. We'll see. So far, it hasn't been scary at all. It has been interesting. And I'm enjoying the main character. She's definitely not the best person, and she's not always likable, but I do find some of her reactions to things super relatable. Some of her internal monologue is pretty relatable and funny to me. Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. It could go many different directions, and I really don't know yet if this is going to end up being something that I really enjoy or if I'm going to really dislike where it goes. It's all up in the air. So that's where I'm at. Made lots of progress, halfway through 2 books, finished 2 books, and DNF'd a 5th. I'm going to finish Natural Beauty and Black Sheep, but I'm also going to hopefully get to at least 1 more. So I will have finished 5 books for this video with a DNF. So, but anyways, I'm having fun so far. I'm excited to finish a couple more books and share my thoughts with you. So I will do that. And I'm extra excited to jump back into Natural Beauty because as I was filming this update, I kept getting notifications of Jananie leaving comments. So I really want to know what she's saying and what's happening. So I'm going to go off and do that, and I'll be back once I've finished something else to share my review. Okay, I'm back, having finished 2 more books, both Natural Beauty and Black Sheep, so I'm excited to share my thoughts with you. Okay, so starting with Black Sheep, I finished that one first, and it ended up being okay for me, sort of middle of the road. I generally had a good time. It was pretty quick and easy to get through. There was one reveal that was sort of surprising to me. We got a little bit more in the horror elements at the end, but not nearly as much as I would have wanted. And the direction it went in ended up being a little sillier than I'd hoped. It didn't go quite as dark, quite as scary as I'd hoped. And looking at the reviews, it seems like this author is kind of known for writing cozy horror, which I did not know going into it. So I kind of wish I had known that because my expectations were not met. I was expecting things to get darker, grittier, scarier, gorier. And we did not get there. I do think the family dynamics were interesting. I think looking at this as a commentary on growing up in high control religious organizations or just high control groups in general and the impact that has on children, as well as making the choice to cut off family or to go no contact with family as an adult for your own well-being. Those are topics that definitely need to be explored. And I'm not saying this book didn't do a good job of exploring those things. I just felt like it could have gone deeper. We could have had more. It didn't feel like there was enough meat to it. You know, it just felt a little half-baked, I guess. And I was really expecting that sort of explosive climax with, very intense horror, some scary moments where we're worried if she's going to make it out. And I think the author tried to do that. It just didn't really land for me. I didn't feel the tension at any point. And the big bad was so cartoonish that they were kind of funny to me. I didn't find them menacing or scary at all. I don't know if I have much more to say. For me, I think I'm sitting around 3 stars. It was fine. I didn't hate it. I liked the main character for the most part. She made some bad decisions, but like generally, I liked her. But yeah, it just didn't really go anywhere. And maybe if this had been longer, we would have been able to delve a little deeper into some of the thematic content, have a little bit of a slower build to some of the scares so that they would have more of an emotional impact. I don't know. But for me, we're sitting around a 3-star. I'm going to do a super short spoiler section. I honestly don't have that much to say about this one, but I did want to share my thoughts on the ending. So, spoilers ahead. If you're never planning on reading Black Sheep and you want to know how it ends, basically the main character finds out that her dad is Satan. She grew up in a satanic cult. Her dad disappeared from her life when she was a child, and she never knew her dad's name. And then she goes back for this wedding, and her dad is there, and she learns that he is, in fact, Satan. She discovers that she has some satanic powers, and then she's brought back to the house and sacrificed, basically, on her 24th birthday. Her dad, Lucifer, good old dad, Lucy, eats her rib and then cuts her throat, and then she is basically reborn. But doing that opens up a portal to hell, which is supposed to then allow her to set in motion the end of the world, the apocalypse. But then she decides against helping her dad with this whole apocalypse thing because she's pretty pissed that he murdered her on her 24th birthday, as any daughter would be, and decides instead to send her father, her mother, her whole family and community down into the pits of hell and trap them there and let the rest of the world keep spinning. So she does, and that's it. She goes back to her life, keeps working as a server. It just felt so anticlimactic. I feel like we were supposed to be really horrified with the discovery that they've removed one of her ribs and he's eating it at dinner, and then she's going to be sacrificed to bring about the apocalypse. But it just didn't have any real tension. It didn't feel like there were any stakes. It didn't feel nearly as creepy as it should have felt. And I don't know 100% what it was that was missing. I don't know if it was the atmosphere. I don't know if it was the pacing, the characterization of her dad, especially, who was this like big bad villain who just felt very toothless, which is kind of wild to say about literal Satan. He just seemed like someone's slightly assholey dad who thinks he's cooler than he is. I feel like I keep saying things, but I'm not saying much, and that's kind of how I feel about this book. I feel like it said things, and yet didn't feel like it was saying very much. Nothing was as deep as I wanted it to be, or as impactful. So, yeah. 3 stars. It was fine. I finished reading Natural Beauty super late last night, or early this morning, and I really, really liked this book. I loved how it ended. It really ramped up in the body horror and gore department at the end there. It got wild and weird, and I love horror that gets wild and weird. So I was living for that. I thought it was great. The book itself is not perfect. There are definitely some plot holes at the end, some things that I felt weren't fully explained, or things that were brought up at one point or another and then just kind of dropped, like the author just sort of forgot that thread, or maybe they were supposed to be red herrings. Generally, I thought this book was fantastic. Very similar to Rouge, really turns the whole beauty industry on its head and looks at the ugly underbelly, and I love that. I find it fascinating. Just like with Rouge, I thought it was an interesting conversation here. I thought it was well explored. I thought it brought up a lot of really interesting points when it comes to beauty and ugliness and, you know, the benefits and drawbacks to each, and what we think is beautiful and what it means to be a natural beauty versus a made beauty, and what do we lose when we trade in our natural features for the perfect, beautiful features that we covet. I thought that was great, but not only was I interested in the beauty conversation, I was also really interested in the themes surrounding the experience of a first-generation American of Chinese immigrants, her parents' experience and her experience, the very strange world of a child prodigy as a pianist who had all of these opportunities from a very young age and was in a very competitive and intense and toxic environment from a very young age, contrasting the deep love of music that this character has. And you can really tell that the author is a musician. The author is actually a violinist, but she did an amazing job of capturing the experience of playing piano, getting lost in the music and the feel of the keys. And there are so many quotes that I loved in this book that had to do with the main character's love of music and love of playing piano and the way she could lose herself in the music and how it tied to these really core memories of her parents growing up, teaching her to play piano, teaching piano for a living, them playing piano, and their mutual love of classical music and how it brought them together. Her parents are amazing. I'm obsessed with them. I love them so, so much. It is heartbreaking how that part of the storyline plays out, but I just really loved how the author put it together. They felt like such real, complex, vivid characters, and I loved them. I cried several times in passages where the main character was remembering moments with her parents, or we got little insights into her parents. They just seemed like such amazing people, and she had so many complicated, sort of mixed emotions to do with her parents. The main portion of the mystery and the horror, what's going on with this company, what is happening behind closed doors, what is really happening to these girls, why is it happening, how is it happening. That was really interesting. That kept me hooked. That ramped up over time and really gave a pretty horrific punch at the end. Things went in a direction that I didn't quite expect and also were more extreme than I expected in the horror department, which I was a fan of, but that sort of secondary through line of family and love and memory and connection, this idea of never truly losing your parents because they'll always exist in you, and that your natural features, your DNA, it's your inheritance and something that will forever connect you to those you love. And obviously that's not always the case. Not everyone is biologically related to those they love. Not everyone loves the people they're biologically related to. It's complicated, of course, but I thought exploring that as sort of a tangential addendum to the exploration of natural beauty versus man-made beauty and procedures and changing ourselves to all fit this very Eurocentric, narrow, unattainable beauty standard. Changing yourself to look like everyone else cuts you off from that genetic inheritance from the people who have made you. And I thought that was a really interesting added theme. And I really liked how it tied into her connection with her parents, her love for them, her guilt, her deep need to make them proud, and all of that sort of tied up with their love of music and how important music was to them as a family. I'm probably sitting around 4.5 stars. A great book. I'm so glad this is the one we picked to read together. And honestly, I know I said this in the last update, but it was so much fun to read each other's comments, especially as we got into the last couple chapters and things were ramping up because both of us were losing our minds. We just kept leaving comments for each other and reacting to all the stuff that was happening, just completely aghast. It was wild. And it was really, really fun to experience it along with someone else and see Jananie's reactions as I had my own. I highly recommend checking out Fable, especially if you're in the US, so you can use their buddy read feature and get your ebook through Fable and see each other's annotations. I really, really hope they bring this to other countries. Please bring it to Canada because I want to do this with my friends, with my family, with my book club. I want to do this with everybody. I want to see everybody's reactions as I read a book. It's so much fun. But I am going to do a bit of a spoiler section for this one as well because I have some stuff to say. So skip over this if you don't want spoilers for Natural Beauty. And if you haven't read it and are at all interested, I highly suggest you skip this and just go read the book because it's totally worth it. Okay, heartbroken that her parents would have recovered, maybe not completely, but close to completely. But then she brought them supplements from work, well, technically the supplements from the gunks that Helen had at her apartment, bringing them these super healthy supplements to, help their immune system and get them healed up faster. And it turns out that the supplements are what killed them and that they contained human remains and they died of Kuru from cannibalism. Like, just absolutely heartbreaking. Her relationship with her parents was already so fraught with heartbreak and was so complicated. She had so much guilt already for the situation that they were in, even though it wasn't her fault. But she feels so strongly that it is. And then it turns out that the reason why they died instead of recovering was her fault. Again, she didn't know what she was doing, but it's just, oh my God, so heartbreaking. And then Helen's death was also wild, going from seemingly being totally fine with the exception of, getting lightheaded sometimes, getting headaches sometimes, to basically completely losing all form. Like, she just melted, basically. The descriptions of what happened to Helen's body were horrifying. Like, the body horror is next level. And then discovering that the main character has changed so much from all these supplements that she's taking, that she now looks similar enough to Helen, that the doctors think that she's her twin and want her to identify the body. That also blew my mind, because obviously we can tell things are changing. Her skin is lightening. She basically gets magical double eyelid surgery. Her hair is starting to get lighter, just growing out of her head. Her limbs are getting longer. And so we're realizing that things are shifting and that she's shifting into sort of more of a European beauty standard. But I was still imagining her as looking mostly like herself, mostly like an Asian woman, but with slightly lighter hair and double eyelids and, maybe slightly lankier. But I hadn't realized how extreme the transformation had been until that moment, when it just turns out she looks basically identical to this white blonde woman. That was kind of mind-boggling to me. It also literally just occurred to me that her name was Helen, likely as a call out to Helen of Troy, the idea of the face that launched 1,000 ships. Don't know how that didn't occur to me till right now, but anyway, really thought that there was going to be something to do with Victor's first wife. She was talked about a couple times. It was implied that he kept trying to get future wives to get procedures to look more similar to her. So I really thought that it was going to turn out that he was trying to put as many women as possible through these procedures to try to get one of them to get close enough to his first wife that he could pretend she never died, that he literally found a way to keep her consciousness, keep her brain alive after her accident, and could sort of transplant it into another person. Because there's a lot of sci-fi in this. There's a lot of advanced technology and things that are just not possible in real life. So I was going to a bit of a sci-fi place and thinking that he was trying to replace his wife, but she never came up again. After the first couple times she was mentioned, she didn't come back. And in the end, when they were trying to sort of give possible explanations for why Victor did what he did, they talked about his mother, but they didn't bring up his wife again. So I thought that was a bit of a weird, glaring omission, or just a bit of a blank spot where I felt like his wife had to have something to do with everything, and then she just didn't. It's also revealed close to the end that Victor is a and potentially that he assaulted our main character when she was still a child. But that is also not really addressed. We don't see our main character react to that realization. It doesn't seem to be connected to anything else, and I'm not really sure how that ties in with everything. If it does tie in with everything, it just felt like an extra added shock of oh yes, he's also a horrible human because of this. Moving on. Let's look at the rest of the horrible stuff he's done. And it was he's already done enough horrible stuff. We don't need that as well to make him villainous. He's already villainous. It just felt a little superfluous. It's if this is going to be in the story, it feels like it should have a purpose. I'm not sure what the purpose was. It just felt a little out of place or extra to the story. So that's just something that is sort of standing out to me as another bit of a gap where I feel like things were not quite wrapped up as much as I would have liked. I think the way our main character's story ends in terms of her own physical transformation, I thought that was amazing, honestly. The fact that she's forever changed and basically not fully human anymore, and so far removed from not only her perfect beauty that she reached when she was still taking all her supplements, but so far removed from her natural beauty that she had before, to this completely different land where she's basically like a creature, and her musings on what it's like to be ugly and for people to scream and run when they see her, and the freedom she feels getting to fully be herself and be 100% divorced from expectations of beauty and the beauty standard. I thought that was really interesting, and I loved how it came back around full circle, and that she started to play piano again, even though she would never be able to play the way she did before because she doesn't really have fingers anymore. But yeah, I really liked how that wrapped up. The ending with Sage and Victor and Henry and the pile of bodies where it seems like they just decided all of a sudden that they were gonna dispose of all the girls at once. I'm not really sure why. There are just certain areas where I feel like I missed something or I don't quite get how different aspects of the story connect together, and that's why I feel like I can't give it 5 stars, even though I really, really liked the horror aspects, the body horror, the monster horror almost. It was really gruesome. It was really scary and creepy and weird. I loved it. There was a lot of tension. There was definitely a creepy atmosphere. Like the deer. I still don't know what was going on with the deer, but those deer were creepy as fuck. Never been so scared of deer in my whole life. Her childhood, her relationship to her parents, her love of music, that whole through line, all the girls slowly morphing into the same generic white blonde lady. The moment when she realizes that not all the girls who work at Holistic are white was such a mind-blowing moment, because when she's first hired, she has this thought of like, I'm definitely a diversity hire. Like everyone here looks the same. This store is full of beautiful white ladies and they're hiring me as an Asian woman to make it seem like they're diverse. And then there's that reveal that several of the girls started out Asian and are presumably still Asian, at least in their DNA, but that their physical appearance has been so changed that they look indistinguishable from any other white girl. And the fact that they all changed their names, they were all encouraged to change their names by Sage from their ethnic sounding names to basic white girl names like Madison. I felt like that was such a mic drop. It was such a dramatic reveal. I just want to wrap up this section by sharing a couple quotes that really stood out to me because there were so many good ones. I'm going to try to keep myself in check and only read you a couple, but I just want to give you a taste of some of the things that really stood out to me in this one. So, my life, which had been so predictable before, was now stuck in that blank space between keys, treading silence. I'm not one of those people who thinks music is going to save the world or whatever, but I do think art is one of the only things that can help people get in touch with a part of themselves and the world that's worth saving. I didn't find it very interesting to practice solely beautiful music. Beauty only reaches so far. What would a Mahler symphony be without its dissonances? Not only the excruciating ones that resemble keening, but the gentler ones too, that bruise the listener like the memory of a beloved's fingertips. At the end of the day, it was when composers tried to grasp something at the edge of beauty, or just past it, that made the most meaningful and challenging music to work on. The only thing that had given me any measure of comfort when they had their accident was the idea of inheritance. Their DNA unfolding quietly in my body. A gesture here, a habitual tick there. A part of me was always waiting for them. For my temples to silver like my mother's, stars shooting through midnight hair. For my body to gather in the swells of soft skin I clutched as a child. I hoped I would laugh one day and it would be an echo of my father's joy. I enjoy the immense freedom that comes with being safe from desire. And it is a kind of power to embrace ugliness and its possibility of expression, so much more imaginative than beauty. I'll stop there. I could keep reading quotes forever. I tried to focus on the quotes that I tagged specifically as quote or poetic. So far, of all the books I've read in this video, this one is definitely my favorite. So that was Natural Beauty and Black Sheep. Making progress, 4 books finished for this video, and I have started 2 more. I have an audiobook and an ebook that I'm working on now. I started The Reformatory as an audiobook, and then I have just I finished the prologue of Sisters of the Lost Nation, so I'm reading that as an ebook. So I'm off to keep reading, and I'll be back when I have more thoughts to share. Okay, so I just finished The Reformatory by Tananarive Due, and you might be able to tell that I've been crying. Wow, the end of that well, no, the whole book. The whole book was hard to read, but the ending was like a punch to the gut and heartbreaking, but also beautiful at the same time. And I feel a lot of feelings. Wow. Okay. Words. Communicating. That was really, really good. Wow. That book, damn. As much as this book is incredibly horrifying, and it is deeply horrifying, it's not written like a horror novel. I would definitely categorize this more as historical fiction than I would horror. It is horrifying. It's possibly the most horrifying of the books that I've read for this video, and more so because the horror is deeply grounded in reality, in historical truth, in real life experiences of children. So the Reformatory, basically this is the story of a young boy, Robert Stevenson, Robbie, who is 12 and tries to defend his sister, and in trying to defend his sister gets sentenced to 6 months at the Reformatory, which is a school for boys in the South during the Jim Crow era. It's a story that the author wrote in honor of a family member of the same name who died at a school like the Reformatory, and as a way to bring attention to the kinds of horrors that happened at schools like this. It's really hard to read about the kinds of things that happened at these schools, and we know that these things happened, and knowing it is one thing, reading articles about it is one thing, but reading memoirs about people's experiences in schools like this, reading books like this that do not shy away from the horrors, it's just a whole other level of understanding, of connecting to these children who deserved so much better. This book is really hard to read. There's a lot of intense, dark subject matter. Of course, I'll do my best as always to include all the trigger warnings that I noticed as I was reading on my book card for you, but just be aware going into it, this is a very emotional read. It's very dark and disturbing. It's very upsetting, but it's also very moving. It has amazing characters. I loved Robbie and Gloria, and I felt so invested in their journey and in their survival. I don't think I breathed for the whole climax of this book. I was so invested in these characters. I wanted them to survive. I wanted them to make it so badly. And I won't give spoilers. I'll do a little spoiler section, but it was intense. My heart rate was through the roof. I was very scared for them and just wanted to gather all the children in this book into my arms and keep them safe. It was just very intense and emotional for me, as you can tell, because I am struggling to keep the tears back. But I would highly recommend this. It was fantastic. 5 stars from me. And now I'm in this super difficult position where I don't know if my vote should go to Monstrilio or to the Reformatory, because they're both so good and so emotional, but very, very, very different books in pretty much every possible way. I don't know. I love them both so much. They're both such amazing books. Darn it. I feel like it's a good problem to have, to love multiple books so much that you really struggle with which one to vote for, but I'm so indecisive already that this makes it really hard. 5 stars for The Reformatory. Such a fantastic book. Completely heartbreaking. It destroyed me a little bit, but I'm grateful it did. So I'm going to do a short spoiler section, so skip over that if you don't want spoilers. Wow. I would have been so mad if Robbie and Gloria didn't make it. I am so grateful that they did. The author mentioned in the author's note that the person that Robbie is based on died at the boys' school that he was living at, and he actually died in a similar way, as far as they can tell from examining his remains, to August. And so the character of August's death was sort of based on what they think happened to Robbie, which is heartbreaking. But I'm really glad that the author decided to let both of them live and to give them that hopeful ending of making it to Chicago and being reunited with their father. I'm still so emotional, and having the chance at a new life and safety and family and opportunity in the North. And maybe it would have been more realistic for one or both of them not to make it. Maybe it would have been more fitting for it being a horror novel, but I'm so glad that the author made that choice, because it really felt like the perfect completion to the character arcs throughout this book. This intense, grueling, terrifying, horrifying, exhausting and heartbreaking journey that these characters went on to be reunited with each other and also with their father in a place of safety is just all I wanted for them. God, was I horrified by the villain in this book. There is a character that there's multiple characters that do horrific, awful things and are horrible people, but there's one character that really is an amalgamation of so many of the horrors that were inflicted on children in schools like this. And he's really a disgusting human being. It's so hard to read about him, especially to read sections that share his line of thinking and his thoughts. It's very disturbing and upsetting. But what I thought was interesting is the author mentioned in the author's note at the end that while there are villainous characters in this novel and there are people in real life and in real history who were horrible human beings who hurt people and are not without responsibility for what they've done, the true villain is this system of dehumanization. We even have a moment where the villain thinks about how he never would have treated his dog the way he treated the boys at that school. And it's just heartbreaking to think about the systemic dehumanization of groups of people, allowing not only truly monstrous human beings to perpetrate violence freely without punishment, but also otherwise average people who do horrible things because society has brainwashed them into believing that certain people don't deserve as much respect as others, that certain lives don't mean as much as others, aren't worth as much as others. And this isn't something that only happened historically. It's happening right now. There are groups of people who are so viciously dehumanized. Their pain is not worth as much as others' pain. Their deaths don't matter as much as other people's deaths. Their lives don't have the same value as other lives. And it's heartbreaking to watch it continue to happen. This book feels very timely in that aspect. I thought the reformatory was really fantastic. The setting is very vivid. The characters feel very real, very dynamic. There are quite a few characters, but I feel like the book does a good job of developing each of them enough that we really connect to them and know who they are. The book is long, and there was a point in the middle that I thought maybe this book is a bit too long, maybe it's a touch repetitive, maybe it's dragging a little bit, but that feeling was pretty fleeting. It quickly ramped up and drew me back in, and I was feeling very invested again. So that's really nitpicking. I'm being very nitpicky because this book was so good that I feel like I am trying to come up with even one criticism to lob at it, and I guess that's it. It's maybe a chapter too long in the middle, but very, very, very good. Wow. So that's the reformatory, and I think I'm going to end this video there. I am a couple chapters into Sisters of the Lost Nation, but I haven't had as much time to sit and read it as I would like, and I'm running out of time to make this video, so I think I'm going to continue reading that book on my own time, and I'll just put my review up on Goodreads when I finish it, as well as any of the other books that were nominated that I end up reading, of course. But I think for this video, I'm going to end it on the positive note of a 5-star read with the reformatory. I feel very emotionally destroyed. So maybe it's good that I'm going to finish this video and give myself a bit of a break because, whew, that was a lot. So I want to do a little bit of a wrap up at the end of this just to bring it all around full circle. So here are all the nominees, and here are the ones I'd read before this video. Adding in the 5 I read for this video, these are all of the ones that I've finished. Getting rid of the ones I haven't finished, these are all the books I've read. And let's put them in order from favorite to least favorite. And then just for fun, from most horrifying to least horrifying. Eliminating every book that didn't get 5 stars. We have 3 5-star books. Because I was so much more emotionally impacted by Monstrilio and the reformatory, I'm going to knock Rouge out of competition for my favorite. For the opening round, my vote went to Monstrilio, but if both Monstrilio and the reformatory are in the next round, I'm going to have to do some soul searching to decide which one gets my vote, because they are both fantastic works of literature that also happen to be horrifying. So that brings me to the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like this. Thank you again to Jananie for doing a buddy read with me. It was so much fun to read together. I hope we can do it again in the future. And thank you to Fable for sponsoring this video and facilitating the buddy read, because I'm not sure I've had so much fun reading with another person maybe ever in my life. It was so cool to see Jananie's annotations invitations as we went through to comment back and forth and have little conversations. So thank you again to Fable for sponsoring this video. I highly recommend you check out Fable if you haven't yet. The link is in the description box down below. Try it out, create your own buddy read, check out all of the amazing features they have, especially with their e-reader if you're in the US. Thank you as always to my patrons for your support. If you at home want to join the squad, feel free. There's a link in the description box down below. We'd love to have you, especially in our monthly book club. And with that, I'm going to get going. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you really soon in my next one. Bye, friends.